Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching second and final part of what if Kid Naruto was saved by his legendary grandmother. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
With that, goodbye, let's get the show started. Gentlemen, you four will be escorting this dangerous beast as well as Mr. Everto here to the Dark Forest Sanctuary for supernatural beasts. Now, despite previous grievances, I expect you to be on your best behavior. Saladin clarified with a thoughtful glance at Riven. Riven glared at Naruto, who returned the glare. HMPH, we don't need him. Hell, he's more dangerous than any troll, it should be him inside that cage. Naruto was wearing a tight black t-shirt, faded jeans, sandals, and his Phanto blade in his pocket. The specialists were all dressed in uniform. Naruto growled at him, clearly making fun of his hair, and said, "I'd like to see you try purples." Naruto. Riven, manners. The both of you. I will not stand for fighting between allies. If you have grievances, work it out in an official duel or on the field. Do not, I repeat, do not brawl like savages. I will not have such tomfoolery in my school, Saladin said as he slammed his cane down. Without turning away from Riven or ending the spontaneous steering competition, Naruto asked bluntly, "How much time do we have before the mission starts, Lord Saladin?" Saladin said, "Half an hour." Riven nodded when Naruto said, "Good, I just happen to have my Phanto blade on me. I want a duel." Glaring at one another out of the corner of their eyes, they marched to the adjacent practice fields and moved to opposite ends of the field. As Naruto unleashed his Phanto Zambato with a flourish and slung it over his shoulders, Riven said, "This'll be over quickly." He activated his Phanto Scimitar and the Phanto Ball and Chain bit. Balls and chains as weapons work on weight usage. How does a Phanto version help? I always wondered that. Riven began swinging it around. Riven recklessly charged at Naruto, who sidestepped the attack and charged low, knocking Riven's feet out from under him while using his sword as a distraction. "Well, come on then, or are you going to wait till I fall asleep of boredom first?" Naruto asked. Naruto smiled and said, "So how's the turf taste?" Instead, as he helped Riven up, Brandon said, "Can we just stop this now and get onto our mission?" Riven shoved him off. He exclaimed, "I don't need any help," and Naruto gave a loud snort. Naruto exclaimed, "Really? Because there's this butt ugly impression on the ground that looks just like your face." Riven reached for Timmy's gun in an attempt to shoot the obnoxious jerk, but he was pulled away. After, Sky exclaimed, "Let's just get this over with so we can get rid of him." Riven threw them off and strode over to the flyer. Brandon asked, "Did you really have to go so far?" Naruto assumed a contemplative stance and raised his head. He said plainly and sternly, "Yep," and then put his Phanto blade in his pocket with an overly eager tone. He said, "Welp, come on. Trolls don't deliver themselves." Soon after, he found himself sitting with the droopy-eyed, ugly purple thing in an unplanned stare down. After observing for a while, Timmy proceeded to the cockpit. Brandon inquired, "How's the prisoner?" Timmy remarked, "I think Naruto is intimidating it quiet." "Good, at least snake eyes are good for something," Riven growled, and Naruto could distinctly hear it. "Hey, he's not that bad, you just don't like him because he's one-upped you at every turn," Sky replied. "Well, as long as I'm in control of this vessel, he stays in the prison bay where he belongs. If it were up to me, he'd be in that cell with the troll," Riven replied. "Wait," exclaimed Naruto. Riven began to choke as he yelled, "You're driving purples? I think I'd be better off if I jettison now." When Riven yelled, "You listen here, you son of a bitch," something crashed into the ship. "Something hit us." Brandon exclaimed the words, "Impossible. There's nothing on the scanner," came out crisply from Riven. Naruto charged in and yelled, "It was an energy spell. Look for gaps in the scanner, not blips." He gave it a serious look when he yelled, "Attack coming from the starboard side." Riven turned the ship to port. Naruto yelled, "It's a homing attack. Brace for impact." As the experts fastened their seatbelts and he plunged in, his chakra clinging to the ground, SLAAM. They were struck and whirled away. Riven yelled, "I can't get back in control," right before they struck. "Is everyone all right?" inquired Brandon. Timmy said, "I think I'm all right." Unstrapping himself, Riven said, "I'm fine." Sky unbuckled himself and regained his balance on the uneven floor, saying, "I'll live to fight another day." Naruto groaned, "I think my tail was ripped out." Riven yelled, "You don't have a tail." At him with his typical smile, Naruto replied, "Oh, then I'm fine." He inhaled deeply through his nostrils. Riven punched the board and the hatch flew open as Naruto exclaimed, "Oh shit, we landed in the swamp. Everyone out of the flyer. If we're lucky, we're in a shallow part, but I doubt it." Naruto landed on the muck rather than in it as they all staggered out and into it. You must adore walking in the water. Brandon, Sky, are you guys alright? The Winx, who had witnessed the crash, hurried over to investigate. Naruto, what are you doing here? Riven gave a confident, "Don't you worry ladies, the specialists have it all under control," Naruto snorted. Stella said, "The specialists are here." "Where?" And Naruto burst out laughing. He laughed and remarked, "Oh burned, good one Stella." Riven yelled, "Grr, what hit us?" Gazing up at the hole, Naruto said, "Some sort of high-intensity bolt high-end stuff too since it homed in on us." He yelled, "Oh dragon damn it," and stomped the mush, sending a tiny muck geyser skyward in the direction of the flyer. Wearing the same safari attire as the others, Hinata questioned, "What's wrong?" Brandon looked up and said, "Oh no, we were transporting a troll to a reserve when something attacked us." Timmy adjusted his glasses and remarked, "More like someone an attack like that just screams magic user. It directly hit the troll's prison as well." Naruto said, "I think it's time to let you people in on something." Everyone gathered around him, meaning they knew exactly what was going on. The Trix sisters are more than just nasty high-powered sisters. They are the heirs to 3 apocalyptic witches who wiped out an entire world, turning it from a lush paradise to a barren wasteland. Lord Saladin, Lady Farragonda, and my grandmother Griffin were the ones responsible for their downfall. They are after Stella's ring, believing it to contain a massive power amplifier, and the troll is one of their minions. I was going to take it to a hidden chamber within Cloud Tower after the drop-off. By using this roundabout route we hope to keep the Trix unaware of our knowledge so we can blindside them if we need to, Naruto clarified. Bloom inquired, "So which ones are the Trix?" "The ones you tried to tango with on your first day in Magic City. Icy, Darcy, and Stormy. You can guess their powers," Naruto clarified. Naruto said, "Now come on, I'll tell you the rest as we move." Brandon questioned, "How do you know which way it's going?" Naruto gestured to half-sunken handcuffs. Naruto pointed a short distance away and, sure enough, there was a tree with 4 deep gouges in it. "It's heading in that direction because it dropped the handcuffs as it went. Also that tree was clawed at a bit by it." Riven said sarcastically, "So you gonna tell us the rest? Like why they're being allowed to stay at Cloud Tower if they're so evil?" "Alright, although we know they're the heirs, until recently we didn't know they were still dangerous. So before we were watching, gathering information. Now the reason we let them stay is so we know where they're at least. So if and when they make their move we'll be able to find and contain them. The troll is one of their agents. By scanning its memories we'll be able to figure out about the things they don't want other people to figure out. We've been using the ogre Canute to do that," Naruto clarified, and a few people nodded. Tekna questioned, "So why are you telling us now?" "Because all of us are now in the thick of it. My grandma taught me to always trust my instincts, and I feel that each and every one of us will have a part to play. It will go much smoother if you know just what you're getting into though," Naruto replied. Musa narrowed her eyes at him and said, "You're not telling us everything." Many of them had to hold back from doing a nasty faceplant when he said, "True, and I have reasons for it. 1. If I do, a lot of you will jump to conclusions and do something stupid. 2. I'm not allowed. And 3. I don't have all the info myself. I'm deep in the loop, but not even I've been able to listen in to everything." Naruto nodded in response to Bloom's question, "So there's a lot more to this?" Stella questioned, "So are they really after?" "It's the dragon's fire alone. It's just a type of magic, used in tandem with another type, and it's a nearly unrivaled amplifier. With it they can summon an army of shadow monsters that will be damned hard to destroy. I can regenerate, but I have nothing on those beasties," Naruto sighed. "What do you mean? Regeneration, even on the small scale, requires a great deal of energy. I mean, I've seen you eat once or twice at a local buffet and it looks like you're coming out of a famine," Hinata replied with a nod. "They take it to a new level. They're tens of thousands of creatures that come together to make a larger one. If you use a conventional attack, all you do is cause it to fall apart where it can reform. Grandma summoned a small colony once so I could figure out some counters. Lucky me, the creatures might as well be drenched in oil for how flammable they are." Grandma laughed out loud when I managed to properly kill one in less time than it took for her to summon it. Naruto was reminiscing. He felt a shiver run down his spine and threw out his arms to prevent anyone from going forward. Riven said, "Now what? You spazzing out or something? Shut up and listen. The water's draining away somewhere nearby. And in a swamp like this most of the ground is floating. If there's a whirlpool nearby." Naruto allowed it to linger. "He's right, look over there," Flora exclaimed, gesturing toward a collection of dirt clods covered in grass that were moving in a circle a short distance away. Bloom pointed past the whirlpool and asked, "Any ideas for going forwards? For what I can get, the troll went that way." Naruto slammed his hands on the ground and yelled, "A couple, but I'd say the best one is this." A crystal pane with several spikes pointing downward to support it blasted forward and over the whirlpool. It had sharp edges and a slight transparency. "Careful, I've only used these as a shield or weapon, so the edges are pretty nasty," he said quietly. Riven strutted over the bridge, which was only slightly arced, and said, "Right, I'll lead the way." In the middle of the passage, Naruto exclaimed, "Oh, I get it. He keeps his Phanto blade in his ass." Riven yelled, "Fuck you, you goddamned witches spawn," at him. Naruto said, just loud enough for Riven to hear, "You realize I can make the bridge shatter at any point in time, and you're right over a whirlpool that will drag you down for a hell of a lot longer than you can hold your breath," who immediately sprinted across. Riven yelled, "Not anymore," at him as he began to cross the water by himself. Naruto exclaimed, "Ugh, what is wrong with this guy?" The Winx crossed the strong bridge with the rest of the experts. Naruto addressed the Winx directly behind him, saying, "I say we let him fall into the next natural trap." Hinata questioned in shock, "What, you want to just kill him?" As he stepped calmly over the whirlpool, Naruto said bitterly, "No, I just want to see him humbled. I'm a cocky bastard, but even I know when to clamp it. He needs to learn before he gets his stupid ass skinned." Riven yelled from close by, "What the hell is this?" and Naruto let out a sigh. Everyone hurried forward when Naruto said, "Anyone want to draw lots on who saves his silly ass?" Then something familiar pricked him. "You go ahead, I need to check something," he exclaimed, leaping beyond them and into the treetops while pursuing a well-known monosaurus. As he landed in a crouch just above the Trix, he thought, "Can't do it from one side, do it from another." Then he lowered himself directly behind Stormy. He questioned her directly behind her, "Hey Stormy, whatcha doing in a swamp?" "Holy crap," she exclaimed, leaping back. Icy spat her tone, cough, "Icy, where did you come from?" "Well, you see, when a man and a woman love each other very much," began Naruto. Icy yelled in his face, "Not that, you idiot. Why are you here?" "Stink bomb material, mix swamp muck with standard garbage and heroic spider blood and you get a raunchy mix that sticks and lingers for weeks," Naruto laughed. Darcy questioned, "Really? Any planned target?" "Not really, I thought I'd roll a couple dice and go after the one who passes me. Depending on the number, random chaos keeps you sharp and keeps everyone else on edge." Naruto grinned viciously. "So what are you three beauties up to?" asked the man. Icy started, "If you must know." Naruto smiled as she said, "We are tracking down a troll that ruined an experiment of ours, planning on petrifying the dumb beast." Icy raised an eyebrow in response to Naruto's statement. "Mind if I tag along? I'd love to catch the expression on its face." After saying, "Sisters, quick huddle," she gestured for Naruto to turn around. He did so, but he improved his hearing by using chakra. "If we turn him away it will look suspicious, and we know how deep Professor Griffin has her claws in him. He'll rat us out," Icy shouted. Naruto thought wryly, "It's too late for that, Miss Frozen. What harm could taking him along cause? We know he's powerful, and as long as we watch what we say he'll never be the wiser," Darcy replied. Then there was a pause before Stormy said, "Also, if we have him take point we'll have a damn better sight than all this swamp. Oh, and he'll also be the first to fall into any hazards, so he'll keep us safer," she said quickly. Nobody purchased it. They turned, and Darcy said, "All right stud, you're in." With little regard for the responses, Naruto asked nonchalantly, "Cool, which way, pretty ones?" There was something in his tone, but he got them anyhow. Icy took the initiative and said, "This way." Naruto followed her, with Stormy and Darcy trailing closely behind, both of them wondering how in the world he was able to walk on top of the muck without emitting any mana. The unsightly purple beast approached them shortly after Icy signaled to stop with her hand. Naruto thought it sounded like a complete moron when it said, "Smell good." It glared at him when he said, "Are all trolls this stupid? I haven't met many." A crystal spike that grew downward and then just beneath the troll before spreading outward in a spiderweb pattern was sent down by him until tiny bombs of dull crystal started to appear in the water in a circular pattern about 5 meters away to confuse the Trix sisters. He played with a black fireball. He threw it carelessly over his shoulder, nearly toppling a tree Darcy was standing on. Darcy yelled, "Holy crap! Watch where you throw those things." Icy yelled, "Enough of this," and scared the troll, causing it to sink into the mud and become trapped in the crystal below eye level. Naruto smiled to himself. He swore and disappeared into their gazes, saying, "What? No incantation? Fucking hell." Stormy angrily exclaimed, "He didn't even say goodbye." Naruto smiled from behind a nearby tree, utilizing his mana only to keep the stone troll in a position where he could grab it. There was a cry of, "Mommy!" and a quacking noise, and he laughed so hard that he almost revealed his position. The Trix quickly vanished and the duckling was frozen. The Winks and specialists arrived just as he stepped out casually. Timmy held a locator and said, "I could swear it's supposed to be right here." Naruto stepped into view, his entire crystal creation with the troll safely inside, and said, "It is, just petrified." Gazing at the glittering web in wonder, Stella said, "How are you doing this? Isn't your mana hellfire?" He saw Riven and replied, "Yes and no. I have 2 types, hellfire and crystals." Naruto remarked, "Oh great, you're still alive." "Well no thanks, you're leaving us without warning," he growled at him. "I left to keep tabs on the Trix and make sure things went properly. If not, then I would have had no idea where the troll sunk, and all this would have been for nothing. Also I'd say I've convinced them I'm oblivious to their plans," Naruto said as Riven growled. Riven stomped up to Naruto and almost fell into the bog, but he was blocked by a rounded portion of Naruto's web. "Look, I'm getting really sick of your oh so superior attitude, jackass," Riven exclaimed. Naruto inquired, "You okay there?" As Brandon helped him up, Riven swore and spat out some muck. "Screw you." Naruto pointed in the direction he could sense the elven teacher was coming from. "Look, thanks for all your help, but I have to port out of here with ugly into ladies. The place you want to get to is that way, guys. You can tell Saladin that despite complications the mission is complete." He grabbed a piece of parchment with a storage seal on it and bit his thumb to seal the stone troll inside, saying, "If you'll excuse me." Then, in a burst of yellow light, disappeared. Timmy exclaimed in amazement that was without a drop of magic. Riven growled, "That's impossible. No one can teleport without magic." "Can we please just get back to Red Fountain?" Sky exclaimed impatiently. "We can ask Headmaster Saladin when we get back." Cloud Tower in a flash. Naruto entered the room that he and Griffin had set up beforehand to serve as a beacon. The floor was covered in Hirishin seals. The creature was at an odd angle. When he attempted to stand it up he snarled, and crystals surrounded it. Supporting it he exclaimed, "There, finally," as his grandmother entered. Naruto nodded when she said, "It would be safe to assume the Trix got to it first then?" Griffin nodded as Naruto remarked, "Yep, I even scored a front row seat. It's probably a little weaker because they didn't use an incantation." When she put a hand on the stone troll's brow and a glowing green symbol appeared, she said, "Very good. Now let's see what we can learn." They witnessed all of its interactions with the Trix as a flash of green light burst from its eyes. Resembling beams from an old-fashioned camera, it was confirming a few things, but nothing they already knew. The performance ended in a minute. Well, that was somewhat informative. She focused, and when the stone troll reappeared in a far-off wilderness reserve, it sank into a pool of green light, depetrifying. Griffin smiled slightly as Naruto remarked, "That was a waste of time. We need new information, not 5,000 confirmations." "Oh crap, that rhymed." "True, but we know enough. Everything is in place. The dragons fire the Trix, the 3 schools. All we have to do is wait for someone to make a move now," Griffin replied. "The best traps are made off of reactions. After all, Hinata and I are ready. We've been trained in using our mana in all sorts of dangerous ways and how to defend from all sorts of attacks. The combination spells we can work together will trump just about anything. 2 high-powered defensive spells and 2 offensive ones. I hope it's enough, because if not," Naruto allowed it to linger. He didn't have that sentence. "Don't worry, they'll still have myself, Saladin and Farragonda to go through, although with the dragon's fire it may not be enough," Griffin said with sadness. Griffin caught him by the shoulder as he said, "Well, with my hellfire practically its opposite, I might be able to cancel it out if I overchannel it." "No Naruto, you are forbidden from doing so if there lies even a single option. Otherwise you remember the last time you attempted to use all of the demonic power inside you," Griffin replied with a stern face. "Rewind. Growl." Naruto roared as his body was engulfed in demonic energy, his eyes gushing dark red, nearly black mana, and red power ripping off his skin. He battered the wall his grandmother had erected. Even though he was in pain, he was powerless to stop the flow. He was barely conscious. With a 5th fox-shaped tail made of demonic chakra and hellfire, anything at all, it was necessary to destroy everything. After sensing the enormous demonic energy being released, Saladin and Farragonda teleported close to them and said, "I don't mean to be presumptuous, but I believe we can help." Sweating, Griffin nodded. She was aware that her grandson had a formidable monster, but this was something else entirely. He yelled, "All must burn." He grabbed Hellfire and Yoki, demonic chakra, in his right hand and slammed the orb of volatile energy into the ground, forming a pillar of pure demonic energy that rose upwards. Just in time, Saladin and Farragonda reinforced the barrier Griffin had erected. When he screamed, "No, no more," The energy abruptly solidified and shattered as his natural mana type emerged a full year earlier than the usual 15, containing and purifying the Hellfire in Yoki, leaving behind a crystal statue of the five-tailed Naruto that began to crack before abruptly shattering and vanishing, causing Naruto to collapse to his hands and knees, panting in horror and exhaustion. "Naruto!" Griffin exclaimed, shedding her icy exterior and hurrying to assist him despite his agonizing groan. He appeared unharmed even though his teeth had grown into tiny, unmistakable fangs. It was still him. She inquired, "How do you feel?" As she assisted him in dressing his wounds, which were already closing up and releasing steam, he uttered the simple words, "OWW." He shuddered and said, "I'm just glad I didn't kill anyone." Then his stomach began to churn, blood-red crystals spilled from his mouth and broke on the floor, and he passed out. "We need to find a way for this to be less volatile. Knowing your grandson, he's liable to get into a situation that he has to use that much energy again." Saladin offered the idea and everyone nodded, in addition to revealing Naruto's natural mana type. This incident gave rise to the concept for the final rune on his sword. Its objective is to grant Naruto complete command over his demonic changes for as long as he is in possession of the blade, to serve as a buffer, preventing his emotions from being overtaken by bloodlust and enabling him to make thoughtful, well-informed decisions. However, this was risky because it might also cause him to lose his inhibitions, which could be worse. Over the flashback with his eyes steeling, Naruto said, "I'd rather not go through that nightmare again, but if I have to I will. I hope I'm ready." Griffin nodded. "Naruto, I want you to practice with Hinata at Alfea tonight. Bring in all of her friends as well. They're tied into all this." Griffin responded with a nod. Naruto blinked and was the only person in the room when she said, "I'll also be giving you the pay of an A-rank mission." He exclaimed, shaking his head, "How does she keep doing that while suppressing her mana and chakra? It's driving me nuts," and walked out of the room, his grandmother grinning and completely invisible. That evening Tekna posed the question that was on everyone's mind. "So you want us to attack you, as you and Hinata use conjoined magic to defend?" Before essentially shoving the Winks out the door and heading to the gym, Naruto had appeared in the middle of their apartment, frightening the living daylights out of them. Flora remarked, "You know, you could have asked nicely." Stella sighed when Naruto asked, "Where's the fun in that?" As they entered the gym, Stella questioned, "Do you ever change?" Stella shook her head in response to Naruto's question, "Have you seen my grandmother's photo album?" Naruto nodded as Hinata stated, "He was born a blue-eyed blonde with whisker marks on his cheeks." Bloom remarked, "I'm going to need an explanation here." Naruto smiled. Naruto continued to smile and remarked, "Basically, I've been exposed to both foreign mana and life energy. It's affected me." Musa yelled, "So that's why you're so annoying?" Naruto boasted, "Nope, that's all me." As he and Hinata moved to stand close by, the training started in earnest after he said, "Okay now, let's get started." After learning what the Winks had been up to during his training trip, Naruto remarked, "Unbelievable." Stella and Musa snorted at Naruto's dramatic statement. "1 week? Just 1 freaking week and you get into this much trouble? Without me? Oh, you were cruel?" Hinata was simply frustrated, and the other 3 Winks were perplexed. "Still, I had my communicator on me. You could have just called me and skipped the whole mess. I mean, really? Who sneaks into a school of witches and doesn't expect to get into trouble?" Naruto responded with a few blushes. In an attempt to counter, Tekna said, "Well, how do witches and warlocks expect to find anything with how poorly categorized their inventories are? You girls fell into a trap with those rooms. The artifacts were solid illusions, as the tower specifically started hounding all of you into more and more dangerous areas and away from the actual artifacts and libraries. The only reason you girls are alive is because Grandma deactivated them and let you out," he said with anger. "Hey, no fair, Naruto. You get into trouble on a regular basis and I don't read you the riot act," Stella objected. When he held his thumb and index finger less than an inch apart, he said, "That's because I don't get myself this close to getting killed if not for outside intervention. It's because I train to get out of trouble and I use it so that I can get more powerful. It's because I take into account the legal and easier routes as well. Did it not occur to any of you that if you told Farragonda, then you would have had the Ring of Solaria back in your hand in less than 5 minutes without any hassle whatsoever?" he asked. Hinata's eyes widened and she her forehead. Musa raised her hand and said, "Quick question." He smiled at her and said, "Yes, the pigtailed girl in the back." Naruto's face fell when she said, "What the hell are you doing here on the day of the rose? Shouldn't you be with your mother or something?" Then Hinata explained, "Musa, Naruto's mother died due to delivery complications. It's not only his birthday but the anniversary of his parents' deaths." Naruto winced. Then he said somewhat grimly, "All right, Hinata, that's enough." He grinned when Flora asked, "Did you do anything for your grandmother then?" "I did. She's busy today, so I put a vase of crystal roses on her desk. It should brighten her day a little. He was grinning. That's so sweet. It reminds me of my cousin Abigail, how she'd still give her mother a rose despite being on bad terms with her, Flora replied. Ah, so you were Thorn's cousin. I was wondering at the uncanny resemblance. Can you give her a message for me if you see her? He asked with a wink. Flora was shocked when he said, tell her I managed to undo the damage she did to my room and I'm going to return the favor tenfold. Flora said anxiously, certainly, but what did she do? She grew a whole load of blood roses in my room, so when I woke up they attacked, and in case you don't know, blood roses will shoot up into the air and try and stab anything that moves so as to make its own fertilizer. There were at least 1,000 in my room, and that is not the type of wake-up call I appreciate, Naruto said with a grimace. Getting out all that ash was such a pain. Tekna questioned, ash? Naruto smiled and Hinata blinked as he said, oh, I put up a high-intensity fire cloak and they all burned to nearly nothing as they attacked. Naruto nodded in response to Hinata's question. I didn't know you could use your hellfire defensively. Doesn't it burn even you? That's where crystal armor comes in. It's one of the only things I know of that actively holds back hellfire with reliability, a thin layer of it, and I'm laughing, Naruto replied. Stella inquired, so just where were you last week? Training. I was working on more ways of mixing my monotypes. They're direct opposites, so it's hard to get it to work. One corrupts and destroys while the other purifies and protects. One's malleable and dark, the other is solid and nearly transparent. They just don't want to fit together. I also finished off a project of mine, but it fell through anyways, though I did come up with a pretty decent alternative. Naruto responded with a shrug before Flora's clock. Flora hurried off to get home to be with her mother, saying, oh dear, I really have to go. I'm late as is. I'll see you all later. Before leaving, Tekna said, I'm afraid I must leave as well. I bid you all good day. Naruto gave a shrug. So, who wants to hit the dining hall for some breakfast? Part of my gift to Grandma is that for the next week I don't stir up any trouble for her, so you don't have to worry about watching me, Naruto said, and a few people nodded. He received a few interested looks as he strolled down to the dining hall with them. Hinata took advantage of this moment to embrace Faragonda and put a dethorned rose in her hair. After a brief peck on the cheek, she was seated with her friends once more. Hinata nodded in response to Bloom's question, so what is the day of the rose anyways? It's something like Mother's Day, right? Then Hinata pondered, yes, it's a day you show appreciation to your mother, usually in the form of a rose. Bloom pondered for a while after Hinata said, why don't you visit your mother on Earth? I'm sure she'd be glad to see you. No, she's not too comfortable with magic. Last I saw her I don't want to make it worse by introducing her to a bunch of strange holidays. Bloom was fidgeting slightly. Sighing, Naruto said, well, you have a pass for this week, Buddha. Before shrugging it off before he left, he said, never mind. He always acts weird this time of year. I guess he's going for melancholy this time. Hinata spoke softly. Stella sighed and remarked, poor guy, all he's got are pictures and stories of his mom. He doesn't even have memories. Musa got up and followed him out, saying, I'll go see if he's okay. I know a bit of what that's like. A little while later, she found him effortlessly, transforming the boulder into a pincushion by hurling crystal spikes filled with hellfire at it. He snapped his fingers and they all exploded when he finally had no square foot left to impale despite their small size. The explosions were so powerful that burning slag was rained down. Act! Musa exclaimed in disbelief, and it stopped at that moment as well. Naruto was standing in front of her, biting his thumb so forcefully that blood was drawn. He said, arm please. She extended her right arm, almost pulling it back in surprise when he squeezed a drop of blood onto it. He had an incredible grip. He said, Me vos lucrum meus vox. May you gain my power. And Musa felt a slight heat rise as the blood seeped into her arm and her burns eventually went away, but it did leave her with a persistent hunger. Sorry about that. I should have checked if someone was around before using hellfire. Musa smiled ruefully and asked, what did you do? I've always sucked at healing spells despite my regeneration, so what I do instead is I use a bit of blood magic to give someone their own regeneration for about a day. It's just as strong as mine, including the massive appetite. Naruto clarified and Musa nodded. She understood. So, Musa began. Unsure of his next move, it had become rather awkward at that moment. Musa saw a massive crystal spike emerge from the earth directly behind her, catching a lot of the flaming rock and launching a transparent crystal pane over her head. Musa clutched a tiny lotus flower pendant she had been carrying in her pocket earlier and asked, just what do you know about your mom? I barely know anything of either of my parents. From what I know about my mom, she was a real troublemaker. I get that from her. She also had a knack for escape and retribution. She was a powerful witch, but she was a wild soul. She hated being restricted and was a real free spirit. I guess that's what led her into that fight with Grandma. She ran away and vanished entirely. 9 years before I was born, she incorporated herself well into my father's world despite the fact it hasn't developed ley lines yet. It's ironic really. The fight she had with Grandma drove her to my dad. What killed her gave me life. Naruto was lost in thought. What about your father? What happened to him? Replied Musa. On the day I was born, a demon attacked the village. My father was the strongest ninja there. He was strong enough to end a decade-long war with just a month of effort. Buddha, the creature, was a living natural disaster, unkillable, unstoppable and utterly indestructible. It was a 9-tailed fox the size of a mountain. Each one of its tails could cause an earthquake or a tsunami. It had a burning aura that decimated everything that came near it, Naruto said with a slight shudder. Naruto nodded in response to Musa's question. Your father beat it, didn't he? Yay, but he had to use a suicide technique. He summoned something. Some people say it was the personification of death itself. No one really knows. He used its power to contain the creature, in me, he stated, and Musa gasped. Oh, it gets better. I lived alone for the first 3 years of my life. I don't remember it, but I've scried on my own past. I was neglected and abused because the idiots thought I was the monster reborn despite being the spitting image of the local hero, my own father. My grandmother found me on my 3rd birthday when I made the mistake of going into the main village to enjoy the party celebrating the demon's defeat. I ran into a drunk and tripped him. He said the demon was attacking and a small mob was quickly whipped up. When a couple of them grabbed weapons, I ran and hid just in time for Grandma to scry on me. The rest is history, Naruto said to Musa. Wow, and I thought this was a confusing day for me, she replied. Naruto snickered a little and said, hell, if you want it to be some kind of competition, I got more. Alright big guy, try me. What could you possibly have to make the Day of the Rose more confusing? Asked Musa. 6 years ago, again on the Day of the Rose, I went with Grandma to lay a flower on my mother's grave. The leader of the village I was born at turned out to be an architect of some skill and had to talk business with Grandma for a bit. He began and Musa replied. So I was left to my own devices for a while. Naturally I caused widespread pandemonium and headaches before finding a spot to nap. As I settled down I heard someone rushing in my direction and I watched laying a trap. He had kidnapped a girl my age. Her name was Hinata, Naruto stated, and Musa responded with a knee-jerk reaction. I ended up killing the man and rescuing Hinata, but not before he could enact his revenge, and used a complicated rune system to lock up certain abilities highly valued in her family, so highly valued that when her father, the clan head, learned about what happened, he ordered for a torture/enslavement rune to be branded onto her forehead. Naruto grumbled, and Musa was now giving him all of her focus. I won't get into the sordid details on what I did to the guy and how many laws I broke. Me and Grandma did, however, teleport with Hinata in tow out of there and introduced her to Faragonda, who promptly adopted her. So it's also the day I got Hinata adopted, killed for the first time, and first time I got the riot act read to me front to back by Grandma. Before it would never be at that level, so on these days I don't know whether to be happy, sad, proud or ashamed, said Naruto. Alright. You had me beat really early on into that anyways. Geez, still nice to know someone can wallow in the misery with me, Musa replied. Hey, Grandma, join us. If she wasn't so busy for political reasons, she has to record the comings and goings of every student in the tower. That takes a huge chunk of her day. Then there's typical damage control, administration, and helping out numerous teachers, as well as maintaining many artifacts, not to mention politics for someone of her rank. Before she saved me, Grandma had often made a habit of doing most of her work on this day, and it helps her cope with the fact that I'm the only family she has left, Naruto replied. As Naruto began to lead her on a brief walk after breaking the crystal and using some mana to boost the ground's already quick self-repairing ability, Musa questioned, I thought witches don't care about other people, aren't they all supposed to be, I don't know, bad? Well, look at things this way, if nearly everyone you met thought you were a monster before getting to know you, you'd be on guard, right? Naruto replied with a nod. He received another nod and said, you'd be pretty paranoid, yay? If almost everyone blamed you for everything or would betray you. Naruto grinned at her and gave her an indirect compliment, saying, well, it's like that for witches and warlocks alike. We have to be picky as hell when it comes to friends, and you need to be exceptional at reading auras to find someone's true intentions. Lucky me, though I have a few cheats, so I know who I can talk to. Musa began, so I guess losing someone you do trust to a witch, Issa, Naruto nodded. It's devastating, and the pain never goes away. There are very few truly evil witches and warlocks. You could probably count all of the ones in magics with your fingers. We're more paranoid than anything, Naruto concluded, and Musa gave a nod. He rummaged through his pockets and took out a picture of a 20-year-old woman with long crimson hair and cat-like yellow eyes, saying, oh, I almost forgot. I do have a picture of my mother, right about here. She was tall and well-built, and the photo showed her successfully dragging out a younger griffin with the assistance of her father, who was clearly in good shape despite his apparent advanced age and who clearly had his skin and hair with a semi-crowded beach in the backdrop. All three of them were dressed in bathing suits. Griffin's hair was long and flowing instead of horn-like, and it seems that she had a very attractive figure when she was younger. "She's very beautiful, was very beautiful," said Musa. With a smile, Naruto said, "Thanks, it runs in the family." He laughed when Musa said, "Oh, you freaking a break up the moment, why don't you?" "So, Naruto began. After a few more minutes passed, Musa slowly shook her head when he asked, "What's your mom like?" "Ah, so she's gone." "Yay, she was an amazing singer. The people of my world have always gained their power from music, but she was in a league of her own. There was no real way to describe it, she just had this ability." Musa sighed. "Nothing harder to describe than that all-important personal touch, that little bit of the soul you push out, eh?" He said with a nod. He noticed the mechanical lotus in her hands and said, "I take it that's a hollow picture?" Activating it with a mana spark, she said, "Yay, it is." One layer of petals unfolded, slowly rotating and producing a tinkling sound akin to a music box. It featured a woman with Asian features and long, flowing black hair who was possibly in her early 30s. She was posing as though she were singing while wearing a flowing gown of pink and crimson. Musa smiled slightly at the recollections of Naruto's statement, "Well, she's certainly beautiful." She smiled a little when he said, "And I can see you take after her." Musa, blushing a little, pocketed the holographic photo and asked, "Can you go 5 minutes without flirting?" Naruto assumed a position of contemplation. "Nope," he said with a grin without much venom in her voice. She said, "You're impossible." She let out a sigh as Naruto acknowledged, "Well, that's kinda the point." "How can you be so cheerful?" replied she. "This is the anniversary of your parents' death." Naruto looked thoughtful as he remarked, "I sound cheerful? Hana weird." Without any genuine venom in his voice, he uttered, "Damn environment messing with me again." Musa said, "You're so weird." Naruto smiled and said, "You have no idea." He paused to reflect. Naruto asked, "Want to go somewhere and get our mind off mothers?" Musa smiled slightly. He held out his hand and said, "Come on, let's have the day fly by." She accepted it, and the two of them vanished in a burst of yellow light. About half a mile from Cloud Tower is the Dragonspine mountain range. As they fell toward a pile of rocks, Musa yelled, "Holy crap!" and held on to Naruto for dear life. Naruto then kicked down, causing an avalanche. After landing on a big, flat stone, he began to ride it down while holding Musa in the bridle position. He merely smiled wider when she screamed, "You're nuts!" and slammed him in the head. He threw her up and yelled, "Hey, your mind's off grief, mine too for that matter. Fly, apart from that, you're a fairy." She suppressed the urge to scream, changed as fast as she could, and hovered after Flash calling Reaper. Naruto was soon flying straight up to her. He ducked under her fist as she tried to punch him, demanding, "You reckless jerk. What the hell's wrong with you?" He pulled down on his eye and stuck out his tongue playfully before soaring away on Reaper. "Sonya," he said, "you needed to get your mind off your mom, so did I. This is a day off for both of us. I spend most of my time studying or training, but I'm taking it easy today. We both deserve a break, and crying and moping is a pretty shoddy vacation in my opinion." Musa exclaimed, "Oh you," before following him away. He yelled back, "Komi and Slowpoke," as she swerved among the enormous pines close to the mountain's base. With more agility than the flying sword, she yelled down to him, "Just you wait, smart guy, I'll wipe that grin off your face. With a kiss, I hope." Naruto yelled at her, blushing scarlet, as he ducked beneath a branch and avoided an old pine without even looking. Naruto laughed aloud as he leapt over another branch and landed, only to quickly duck back on Reaper as Musa yelled, "Bloody pervert." Musa was now determined to exact revenge. Musa finally had an idea after 10 minutes of frantically flying and dodging, and she cupped her hands and yelled up to Naruto while grinning mischievously. He gave himself whiplash to get an eyeful, but he was disappointed and didn't pay attention when a branch swept him off Reaper, causing him to land badly with a sickening crunch. "Ack! My top!" he snorted. Musa went pale. She flew down to his prone and motionless form and exclaimed, "Oh no!" His neck was at an angle she didn't even believe was feasible, so she didn't even need to check. She nodded, then did a double take and looked at Naruto as he said, "Ouch, that's gotta sting." Musa demanded, pointing from one to the other, I mean you. How?" Naruto smiled and gestured to the other, who began to turn to blood. He casually held out his hand and Reaper appeared in it as he swung the enormous blade onto his back, saying, "It's a new technique I developed. I created one when I first teleported by purposely displacing some blood and channeling energy into it. I've been not only following but cloaked the whole time." After struggling to find the right words, Musa drew herself up and stormed off with an enormous smile on his face. Naruto exclaimed. Ah ha 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 ha. Oh, it's a good day alright. After that, he swiftly covered himself in chakra and idly trailed Musa as he depowered and moved in a wide but leisurely circle. Musa questioned, blood? Did something die here? From a distance, leaning against a tree, Naruto said, Yami. His smile only got bigger as Musa marched away once more this time. Instead of following, he took out his music player and listened for about 30 minutes until Musa entered the tiny clearing once more, this time from directly next to the tree he was leaning against, and he arched an eyebrow when she jumped. He snickered and said, hello. Still furious, Musa yelled, stop following me. Naruto pointed to a pool of blood the size of a person and said, you've been going in circles, see the blood spots just over there? Follow you? You're a big girl. I don't need to follow you, I just stood here burning through my favorite tunes. Musa began to scream, oh for the love of. But Naruto came up behind her, caught her by the shoulder, and they were back at Althea in a flash. She yelled, stop that, and he raised his hands. Musa complained a little when he asked, would you rather I leave a friend to wallow in sorrow and self-pity? Naruto offered his hand and said, here, how about something a little more docile? Musa sighed and accepted it. They vanished quickly and resurfaced in Alfie's VR section. He pulled up a protocol he had prepared for such situations and said, ah good, no one's using it. Musa inquired, what is this place? A virtual reality center. The program is going to be a game type where you'll temporarily be in the mindset of another person. In this case, we'll both be sharing a role as the player doesn't directly do things. Naruto laughed. Musa questioned, really? What game? And Naruto grinned. Musa rolled her eyes when Naruto stated, it's called Ghost Master. The goal of the game is to scare the crap out of mundanes. Hey come on now, this can give you the same guilty thrill of pulling one over on someone without getting into trouble. They went into the room after Musa said, okay, fine, but only to keep you out of it. Within the chamber the teenagers asked, what is your name, Spirit? Naruto, who was now incorporeal and hovering next to Musa, smiled. She moved the wiggy marker to the letters MUS after he asked, Kamona, what's our name? Naruto smiled and then put his hand over the T and O. A wicked voice yelled, Musto, and a tornado of green energy erupted from the wiggy board. The teenagers dispersed, only to encounter a large number of spirits that had been drawn to the surrounding area after 3 minutes. Naruto was laughing while he saw everyone fleeing in terror and yelling bloody murder. Musa said, you enjoy this? He helped her mentally scar a whole sorority for life by saying, oh just wait, you'll learn to love it. Then, by guiding mortals to the dead bodies and releasing the imprisoned and tortured spirits, assisted her in uncovering 3 murders, taught the frat boys to honor the deceased while releasing more ghosts in the past. As the show ended, a clipped voice asked, are you two quite done in there? Naruto grabbed Musa's shoulder and yelled, sorry, we'll pour it out. They disappeared, only to reappear in the dining hall as Musa realized her stomach was empty. She groaned, oh god, I'm starving. Naruto rolled her eyes and smiled, saying, welcome to my world, stay for a day, it'll feel like a lifetime. He held out a small crystal with a rune on it and said, here, it sealed this from lunch yesterday. After a puff of smoke, he presented them with a big sandwich platter. When Naruto's communicator began to ring, they were still hungry and halfway through. He said, yo, this is Naruto. He listened as his eyes widened and then narrowed. He closed it and placed it in his pocket after saying, got it, I'll intercept. Looks like I'm going to have to run, Musa. Duty calls and I need to nip a potential disaster in the bud, he stated. She inquired, what's going on? Don't worry about it, but I gotta go. You can finish the platter, I know you're still hungry. He replied with a smirk. He kissed her on the cheek and left before she could reply, saying, Sayo. Musa sighed as she looked down at the assortment of sandwiches. After reaching up to feel the kiss's lingering warmth, she laughed to herself and then grabbed another sandwich, saying, my first date and he scared me to death, brought me to school and fed me leftovers, so ouch. Beneath the cloud tower as Riven attempted to slip past, Naruto yelled, hey Purples. The Phanto blade was out and aimed at him in a flash. Hey chill out man, I'm not here to fight. Riven demanded, what are you doing here? Riven nodded but continued to swing the blade as Naruto explained. I use these tunnels to train things like stealth, detection, all sorts of stuff, he said, but I do want to talk. About what? He growled viciously, to which Naruto replied, the Trix. Riven said, I don't care what you say, she saved me. Naruto nodded. Naruto remarked, that she did, but from Icy not Bloom. Riven demanded, what are you talking about? Think about it, Bloom comes from an underdeveloped world both tech and magic-wise. She has no violent tendencies and was conveniently placed to take the blame. It was a good attempt but still a little sloppy. She was a good but nowhere near good enough scapegoat. Icy on the other hand is known for brutality, is well experienced with magic and such a thing is just her style. Her sister Darcy on the other hand is developing a little something for you purples. She got cold feet and knew how to save you because her elder sister was the perpetrator. Naruto proceeded to explain quietly and Riven's eyes as he raised the sword again. He half yelled, "How the hell could you know any of this? You weren't there." We have animated sighing orbs scuttling all over Cloud Tower. It's small potatoes to use one to watch the past. Hell, you just need the passwords and you can do it. I could even show you how. Naruto said as the sword was deactivated. Riven pocketed the weapon and said, "I don't see how this changes anything. If you're not going to make a problem out of this, then why are we talking? Those three are close. I just want you to know what you're getting into. Do you recall what I said in the swamp? Icy is dragging her sisters into things that could lead to all unholy hell, and she could persuade Darcy to use you to do it." Rewind. They are the heirs to 3 apocalyptic witches who wiped out an entire world. The flashback concludes. "Yeah, but what?" Riven remarked. "That Bloom girl is a fairy, but she's from a non-magical world." You make a valid point, which is why I advise caution. I might be mistaken. Speaking softly and always having a few aces are essential when dealing with material at this level. If I'm not mistaken. Speaking of aces, Naruto remarked as he took 2 revolvers out of his belt. "What the?" As Naruto held them out, Riven inquired. "Well, you must level the playing field if you want to tango with experienced witches. In addition to being dangerous, these guns will continuously produce bullets in an empty chamber. The bullets will also have a single dispel magic charge. I made them in the hopes that it would fit, but in distance combat, I'm more adept at throwing weapons." Riven took them and arched an eyebrow. But Naruto added, "They're probably ideal for you." "You're giving me deadly weapons that dispel magic?" "Hold on," he asked, "taking them anyhow? Think of it as an indication of trust, which we require." And Riven, "Think about what I said," Naruto said over his shoulder before disappearing from view. "Especially if you're going to be hanging around Cloud Tower." Riven nodded, which made some sense. "You'd better get going to Red Fountain," he said as he walked towards one of Cloud Tower's underground entrances. "Naruto? Oh, Naruto? Where have you gone?" A small voice called out as a tiny form zipped quickly around the tower. At a closer inspection, this tiny form was a girl maybe 15 centimeters tall with insect wings and wearing black and yellow camo with a pair of insect eye goggles hanging around her neck. She had pageboy styled hair that was dark purple. "So he's gonna play that way, eh?" Zing smiled and said to herself, "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Ninja Zing, you're right. All right, it's time to divide up and search for hints, gang. Now where could Heya you stinker?" Zing, who was dressed as an ascot and had just been conjured, declared. Freddy from Scooby-Doo. Naruto, who was hanging above him, suppressed a snort that would have revealed his identity. All he needed to do was put on her goggles, which were similar to his shades and served as a barrier against mind-affecting spells. Zing looked up thoughtfully and noticed the slight bending in the air that indicated Naruto was cloaked. Heh, as he decloaked, Naruto said, "You're getting good at that, Zing." He then dropped to the ground and landed gracefully. "Your fun was ruined by her. Give her a lesson." Naruto rolled his eyes as a shadow clone of Zing dressed as the devil spoke in his ear. "No. You ought to say you're sorry for hiding from her when she paid you a visit." From Zing's right shoulder, another shadow clone, wearing an angel costume with a plastic halo and a fake harp, said, "It's just polite." "Oh, Zing, this is really old. Stop it." As the clones dispersed, he felt the original land on top of his head and declared, brushing them off his shoulders. Zing said, "Hey Naruto, I have a question." She leaned over to look at him, and he looked up at her. "Which of us is the bad influence?" she inquired and received a shrug. He received a nod and said, "Hell if I know, all I can say is that we egg each other on. Hey, would you like to take the lead in pulling off my most recent prank in around 2 minutes? "Yes. What is it?" Zing inquired eagerly. Naruto boasted, receiving a blank look. "We're going to steal lunch hour." "How on earth are we going to accomplish that?" "I've applied illusion runes to every window pane, clock, and even the tiniest computer screen, and watch all clocks will read 1 hour later for 12 hours if we simply put some energy into the master rune. The same is true for the sun's position in the windows." Zing began to laugh evilly as he boasted, "It took me about 5 days to get down pat." Zing chuckled and pumped energy into the activation rune after saying, "Oh, they're gonna be so mad at us." Naruto retreated into a small alcove as the commotion increased, and hundreds of anxious and frazzled witches hurried by, grousing and complaining about the time. "How would you rank this one, Zing?" he inquired. 9.5, Naruto, You need a bunch of girls screaming instead of groaning and cursing if you want to get the perfect grade AHHED, as she clarified, but you got huge points for getting everyone in the mix. Knight growled, and Naruto released his shirt, allowing the crystal that had exploded from his sleeve to dissolve. If Z's vas not so funny I vold be smacking HYU. A sibilant voice spoke from behind Naruto. And let go hoff me. I need like to be skewered on crystals. Think Assassin's Creed wristblade. As Knight rearranged his suit, he apologized. I don't like people getting behind me so anything noteworthy recently. This was routine business between them. Knight would give Naruto information and hard to find items, and Naruto would prank particular targets so that Knight's nightly dinner would be worthy of a king. No, they have something for you. Regardl's Knight pulled out a spell scroll and faded into the wall, saying, I think my debt has been getting RR Rithar Lurge. Naruto unrolled it and quickly read the synopsis. Amazing Strangler level 3 medium spell type. Fear, mind affecting. Effect. A favorite of assassins, it creates a band of shadow that chokes the victim while creating an illusion that makes them think that a creature cleaved from a deep-seated phobia is strangling them. This causes them to ignore more important threats, like the caster and the actual item strangling them. Scary shit here. Wonder where he got his claws on this? He said with a piercing whistle of admiration. Zing read it and gave a quick, wow, and Naruto asked. So, are we engaged in any noteworthy activities today? It was enjoyable to steal lunch, but I'd like more, Zing declared, and Naruto smiled, amazed at Zing's mischievous streak. In fact, it was larger than Zing herself. All right. As he stepped into the passage with Zing on his shoulder, the passage closed behind him and green flame torches erupted into existence. You know that contest that's going on today in the capital, right? Naruto said, punching a brick into the wall, which caused a whole bunch of other bricks to retreat until a whole panel just disappeared into the floor. The magic's miss. She nodded when he asked. Well, this student, Lucy, is a witch with luck-based abilities, but she's not very fortunate when it comes to her genes. In order to look stunning, she will use a powerful illusion to enter with the Trix sisters. Additionally, we will deceive everyone and emerge as the good guys. Zing's smile was enormous as Naruto said. The Trix will be furious. Lucy will be kicked out of the competition. The competition itself will be vandalized, and we will appear to be innocent bystanders. What is the strategy, boss? He smiled when she asked. Well, the sisters will A. Create a strong illusion and then abruptly break it. B. Desecrate the contest. Lucy will be transformed for real, down to the DNA, with a few tweaks to make the illusion subtle. I will use a ton of chakra and mana, and you will use your immense transformational talent. Then watch the show from a distance as Lucy is eliminated. The Trix loses their cool, and the competition is a complete bust. So you're in? There was a cheer when he asked. Yes, indeed. I'm all over that, Zing exclaimed with delight. Nice. What would you like to do to pass the time until it starts up in a few hours? Zing hummed thoughtfully as Naruto posed the question. She said, Hamae, let's visit Alphia, and Naruto nodded. With a shout of, all right, let's go, Zing seized Naruto's hair firmly, and they vanished in a flash of yellow. Palladium exclaimed, oh dear goodness, as Naruto appeared directly in front of the somewhat jittery elf, partially blinding him. In front of almost 30 girls in a lecture hall, he scratched the back of his neck and said, oh sorry, am I interrupting class? He simply focused on the signatures of the Winx girls. He reasoned that since they wouldn't be in the same class, it would be okay to port in if they were all together. He could talk his way out of the problem by bearing a change room, but that would only be a guilty bonus. With a slight dismissal, Palladium said, not exactly, I was just about to dismiss them. Palladium rolled his eyes as Naruto smiled and said, you shouldn't just arbitrarily insult your class, although if you want to do that I can find you a temp job at Cloud Tower. Zing yelled, class dismissed, loudly enough to beat Naruto and Palladium to it. At this, the latter of them laughed. The Winx girls stayed, while the majority of the students left with a little giggle. Hinata said courteously, hello Naruto, Zing, how are you two? After Zing said, all right, but Toon's been whacking around with her parasol again, Naruto snorted. Gazing up at her, Naruto grinned and said, and just what have you been up to get Miss Prim and Proper to go medieval on ye old ass? Zing scratched the back of her neck and said, heh. Naruto's smile now resembled a fox's as she admitted, well I might have used my connections to bugs to kinda mess up her place. He got a nod when he said, let me guess she chased you all over the Pixie village? She shouted insults but still remained polite about it. A further nod. Zing chuckled ruefully as Naruto remarked, and yet I think you're still holding out on me spill. Zing confessed, I kinda did it every day for a month. Naruto laughed. He reached up and shook hands, saying, "Nice job, partner." Hinata let out a sigh. She said, "You two are impossible," Naruto exclaimed, and proud of it, which caused moans. When Naruto began to smile at her, Stalls began to say, "That's nice and all, but we don't have time to goof today, I've gotta get ready for OOPS." Stella turned away, her eyes wide at her slip, and Naruto asked, "Ready for what?" He said, "Come on, tell me." He simply appeared in front of her without any smoke, flash, or blur. She turned once more turned. "Come on, please. Hun." This continued for another minute and a half until Stella blinded him with a massive burst of light. Naruto smirked despite the sound of running as his vision cleared. "Why do you let them get away?" Zing inquired inquisitively. Zing arched an eyebrow before glancing down at Naruto as he explained, "I already know what she was hiding. I just wanted to needle her a little. Stella is going to participate in the Miss Magics. I already slapped a slight amount of spell resistance on her. I won't last past the day, but it should keep her safe from the Trix," she said, perched atop his head. "You really care about her, don't you?" Zing flew down to Naruto's shoulder as he shrugged and said, "I care about a lot of people, I just don't like saying it." Zing questioned, "Why not? I mean, won't it help things along a little?" Naruto sighed. Zing smiled subtly, but occasionally Naruto could still blow her away, because actions speak louder than words and I am a man of action. After all, I keep them safe. That's enough for me, I don't need glory, he said. "Hang on." She caught hold of his ear, and they vanished in a flash of yellow. Zing began to ask, "So where next?" But she screamed the rest and held on to Naruto's ear for dear life because he had appeared outside Cloud Tower rather than inside, as she was used to. He swung around, shouting, "Sonovabitch! Someone must have blocked me," and shooting out a crystal spike from his left sleeve, which followed a delicate chain of crystals that sank into a spire. Zing yelled, "Holy smokes!" before diving behind Naruto's head, clinging to the hairs on his neck as he swung into, shattering a window, and landing on a student's desk. Then, as if he were just walking, he casually landed on the other end of the tower's regenerative magic after fixing the window. Additionally, the crystal had turned into an invisible and innocuous gas after he severed the chain line from his arm. Trude's voice grew louder as she began to glow blood red and a brimstone stench rose from all around her. "I enjoy the mayhem you cause as much as the next witch, Naruto, but you will have to tell me what the fuck is going through your head that you thought interrupting my class was a good idea," she exclaimed. "It was either swinging into a window or decorating the rocks below because someone blocked my teleportation into the tower. It was just a coincidence that it was yours. Now, if you don't mind, I doubt your students want me to continue interrupting your lecture on proper strategy and stacking curses," Naruto said, bowing briefly, and hurried out of the room, not wanting to use one of her curses. Trude's curses were nasty, and Naruto's antics were annoying. Zing asked, "Is it safe?" And Naruto gave a nod. "That is one scary woman." "Simply put," Naruto said, "I won't argue that." He inhaled deeply, closed his eyes, and felt the echoes as he released a tremendous pulse of pure mana and chakra. He said, "Sloppy." He leapt into the opening in the central spire, spread his arms, and lowered them purposefully, shooting a tiny spike from between each finger that was trailed by a delicate crystal chain. He turned over halfway down and proceeded to descend to the dark blue circular carpet in the middle of the tower. It was enchanted to absorb any blow, preventing students from taking their own lives. However, Naruto was furious and wasn't in the mood for a freefall. If he wasn't corporeal, someone had somehow gotten a piece of him that would prevent him from entering the tower. It would even prevent the Hirishin from teleporting expensive stuff, but amateurishly concealed and easily destroyed. He repeated, "Absolutely sloppy." Then, with a chakra-enhanced puff of air, he sent the carpet flying, revealing a series of runes written in a herbal compound that contained a bit of him. Still credit where it's due, them actually going as far as to yank one of your hairs out of a drain right after you shower shows they kinda thought it out. Zing was being kind. Pouring mana into his right hand and slamming it down open-palmed on the center rune, Naruto remarked, "Not well enough. I was doing better when I was in my single digits. Besides, these types of ritual compounds leave a trail." His eyes were white with light, making a tiny flat scoop out of crystal and taking a piece of one rune. He said, "Ariana and Shika-hun. Fine then, if those two newbies want to play rough, then let's see how they handle a sensory swap. With this type of magic, you need a piece of both the victims and yourself so it could draw power from you." The rest of them shut down because the sequence was broken before he reached the top of his jump. Naruto breathed black fire onto it, turning the diagram to ash and causing the stones below to glow. He then grabbed onto the railing of the spiral staircase and launched himself upwards and upwards once more, almost flying, until he landed lightly on a railing and leapt off. Zing remarked as he moved slowly down the hallway, "You know, I remember when those railings were up to your eyebrows." Then he pressed a stone into a wall, and the entire wall disappeared. He entered what appeared to be a pitch-black room beyond, where the wall behind him reappeared and the light seemed to be swallowed. Naruto uttered the words, "Phasmatus lux lucis," ghost light, and 9 plumes of dark blue fire appeared behind him. These plumes then darted around the room, forming an unsettling 9-point formation that changed every few seconds for Naruto and Zing. It was more than enough, even though it hardly lessened the darkness. Zing gradually grew until she had the height and proportions of a 16-year-old bombshell before asking, "Naruto, are you sure this is wise?" "Zing, you know as well as I do that blocking teleportation in an area such as this is borderline lethal. They are standing upon the line. I need to humble them to drag them away from that dangerous limit. Before it was fun and games, but this is very serious now. They need to understand just what a person goes through when sympathetic magic is attacking them, and risking their lives. Madam Cross will be able to reverse their condition within a few moments should the worst happen and heal any injury. We need to cure the stupidity before they get themselves and others killed," Naruto said with a solemn nod. Naruto started, "Phasmatus of Obscurum, spirits of darkness," by making 4 circles appear in midair, 2 diagonal, 1 vertical, and 1 horizontal. As engravings started to appear around the tiny flecks from the previous runes, Zing continued, "Phasmatus of Ira, spirits of wrath." Naruto continued, saying, "Audite nostrum dico, cruor of duos foes s hic pro nos. Hear our call, the blood of 2 foes is here before us." Runes then appeared within the circle's edges. Zing said, "Ready mio lemma, bind them," as each circle that separated the runes and engravings was followed by another circle. When they were both done, the circles shrank, and there was a burst of light. Naruto grabbed something quickly fading from the air and put it in his pocket. "Vis lemma communico pena, communico sanis quad o espereo," commands them to share pain, sound, and sight. "Bray, it always creeps me out when we use this kind of magic. Do we always have to do it in here?" Zing responded. "Yep, we're free from distractions and we get a power boost thanks to this room," Naruto replied. Zing said reproachfully, "I still think you're being a little harsh." Naruto shrugged. After Naruto explained, something began to beep. They need to know what it's like to be on the receiving end of such a high-level curse. If not, they'll end up killing themselves and injuring hundreds. As Zing returned to his normal size, he took a watch from his back pocket and took a quick look at it. With a hint of excitement, Zing said, "Time to go?" Having to employ sympathetic magic made her a little uncomfortable. It was extremely potent material, and you always needed assistance unless you were a Grand Master like Faragonda or Griffin. Only when the anchor was destroyed would the curse be lifted. This one was a small marble that Naruto pocketed and was actually all 4 of the runic circles compacted around the focus points of their victims in the previous spell. The runes in question were the ones that Naruto had disassembled and then melted. Naruto had complete impunity when it came to activating and deactivating the curse as long as the marble was intact. Consider voodoo, but much more potent, and if you can work with the focus, you can turn it on and off. In a burst of yellow light, Naruto and Zing disappeared after he said, "Yeah, just one quick stop first though." Quickly, he ducked to avoid being swiped by Cloud Tower's very strict nurse. Madam Cross, although she did a good job at her job, her bedside manners could use some improvement. With a death glare that fortunately contained no mana, she demanded, "All right, you menace, just what are you up to this time?" Silently, Naruto gave her the marble. Her eyes widened as she looked at it, and her glare intensified. "Earlier today I found myself victim of sympathetic magic. This marble will let you unravel my retaliation before things get too dangerous." The 2 students in question are Ariana and Chica the Spider and the Raven Witches. They need to know exactly how powerful this kind of magic is before toying with it. "I trust your discretion," Naruto clarified prior to bowing and disappearing. This time, no flash. Lucy was enjoying her new appearance in the mirror at this time. Even though she was aware that it was only temporary and that the cost was high, she still wanted to enjoy the fact that she had never looked this stunning before. When Naruto appeared behind her in the mirror, she turned, and he clamped a hand over her mouth. "Can you blame her for screaming? Shht, he exclaimed, pointing to his mouth. "I'm about to take my hand away. You will not scream. You will not hex me. You will however listen to what I have to say," Naruto said with a nod. "All right, Lucy," he said, beginning to remove his hand. Lucy was staring at Naruto with wide eyes, fully aware that the shades he wore on the tip of his nose allowed him to see through the illusion. "This illusion is, as you know, temporary, my partner, and I can make a permanent down to the DNA transformation. However, there will be minor flaws such as hair length and such, but so long as the illusion stays up you should have no problem pocketing the entire contest," she said. "And what are you getting out of it?" in a sultry tone rather than her typical hoarse one. Lucy nodded enthusiastically as Naruto winked and explained, I'm just playing with the Trix sisters, you getting something out of Ida is an unrelated bonus for you. She cried out, yes. Do it, make me beautiful. Naruto bit his left hand, causing as much blood to collect in his palm as he could. Zing placed her hand over his after he dipped his fingers in it and drew a pentagram on her forehead after Naruto began concentrating on pure power. Zing tried her best to mold and shape it into what they desired, and a spooky reddish glow filled the room before gradually fading away after carefully removing Zing from the air and placing her on his shoulder. Naruto stepped back, panting, pushed his shades up his nose, and got a clear view of the new Lucy. Zing grinned and said, we do good work. Naruto gave Lucy his shades and took a sharp look at the mirror she put them on, turned to face it, and froze. She was motionless for a moment before turning and dragging him into a passionate, deep-throated kiss. Zing yelled, whoa, before pulling out a tiny camera and taking a few pictures as she squeezed against him. Naruto was acutely aware that her now DD-sized bust was pressing against his chest, and not that he was whining, mind you. After a minute or so, she drew away, panting, smiled, and pushed him playfully out of the changing room before hopping back to the vanity while remaining silent. Naruto moved slowly in the direction of the viewing area and slid into a seat where there was enough shadow to conceal him without giving the impression that he was hiding. Zing looked at her and inquired, was it really that good, Naruto? Zing nodded when he said, you know the saying that enthusiasm should never replace skill. Zing laughed and then stopped when he said, Lucy just proved it wrong. As Naruto took his glasses out of his pocket, Zing realized, Naruto, she still has you glasses, and blinked. She asked, how did you do that? And he smiled but remained silent. Naruto moaned, this is going to be bad, as a man wearing a white outfit emerged, his hair pulled back into a pair of ridiculous-looking things. He exclaimed, ladies and gentlemen. Naruto looked around, but there weren't many of either. I'm happy to give you my special and magical welcome to Miss Magix. This night we'll crown the most beautiful girl of the realm of Magix. You know the rules, no magic, and remember, every kind of magical ruse is totally banned, and will be harshly punished by our incorruptible and impartial jury. There will be only the girls with their talent and beauty. Naruto replied with a snort. After Allah, he said, and Naruto moaned. He could sense that he was going to ham it up. Naruto palmed his face in response to his question, what greater magic is there than beauty? When the idiot introduced the contestants, Naruto pointedly ignored him because he was only interested in two of them and knew how they looked. Thank you very much. He noticed the Trix close to the front of the stage after a minute or so. How had he failed to notice that? He saw the magic in their surroundings as he directed some mana into his eyes. Nothing major. Just a simple, ignore this, command. As the competitors exited the stage, Icy exclaimed, oh, we made a masterpiece. Her sisters laughed. Naruto kept his eyes on the Trix, prepared to neutralize any spells that went too far, now that he knew what to look for. But let's see. Simple trips, a 10-foot fall, a loss of coordination, nothing major. However, the announcer appeared on the verge of tears. Naruto, who always laughed when he saw an adult man crying, hoped he would. However, Lucy exuded confidence and displayed an unexpected talent for dancing as she spun elegantly, forcing Naruto to smile. Zing, who loves dancing herself, was mesmerized by the scene and thought, well, you just never know what weird skills someone may have. Despite Zing's diminutive size, she was among the loudest, and Naruto grinned at her as the cheers were enormous. Next up was Stella, who danced energetically to a country song while dressed like a cowgirl. Icy attempted to smash an overhead light on top of Stella because she was offended that she was actually pretty good. Left Stella dodge. Stella avoided the missile from above and even gave the impression that she was merely dancing as Naruto sent a telepathic message. A tiny amount of mana shot from her as Darcy noticed, and Naruto could almost feel her smirk. He grinned when the mana bounced off the invisible barrier that Naruto had placed on Stella earlier that day as Stella bowed and the announcer hammered up to her to play the crowd. Darcy snarled. Naruto wondered if Darcy hung around sailors after she muttered something that could never be repeated. After a short while, Stella and Lucy were the only contestants left, and they looked like. Naruto nodded when Zing said, hey, aren't those girls that same color Stella tried to make in the labs last year? After Lucy was nominated, Naruto remarked simply, wonder how they got their hands on that. She approached the front with a smile on her face, and the moment the Trix dropped the illusion, Naruto and Zing gave each other high fives while they choked on nothing. With a disappointed tone, the announcer said, I'm sorry, Miss Lucy, but even a change as minor as hair extension is forbidden. You're disqualified. Lucy screamed, what, you can't do this to me. This is my dream. Give that back, you bastard. She grabbed the crown and fled through the crowd, escaping the grasp of both bouncers and pedestrians. By sheer luck, she yelled, the deal's off, you backstabbing whores. Before leaving, leaving the Trix sisters in disbelief. Before he could extract a spare crown, the announcer uttered the words, "Umaaha, oh dear," he declared, given the current state of affairs, Stella, the Princess of Solaria, is contestant number 6. Stella was crowned right away to thunderous cheers. She glared at Naruto as he got to his feet during it. Instantly capturing her attention, he smiled and disappeared from her view. After a little while, with a wave, Stella dismissed Bloom's cry. "Stella, are you okay? That light nearly got you." "It'll take more than that to catch this girl unaware," she exclaimed. Naruto called down from his perch atop a street light. "That's funny because I could have sworn I told you to dodge left with telepathy." His small glasses and broad smile glinted in the dim light, casting him as a black silhouette against the sunset. Stella yelled, "So it was you messing with the competition?" She half screamed at him, "What the hell is wrong with you? Those girls could have gotten hurt." Naruto lowered himself to street level and stood up, explaining, "Hey. I did not. The Trix sisters were there. They were the backstabbing whores Lucy was referring to. They were vandalizing the contest." There was a brief pause as Naruto explained, "The only bit of magic I used in that building was to protect you and to transform Lucy so she wouldn't be mortally embarrassed and shamed by the Trix." Stella became visibly deflated when he said, "Besides, what are you complaining about? You won, didn't you?" "Yeah, but I don't know that Lucy girla." Naruto smiled as Stella said. Naruto concluded, "We'll have another chance next year," he said, "and she's going to get a lot of fame in Cloud Tower for apparently screwing over the entire Miss Magics. Life's about to take a turn for the better for her, so don't worry your pretty head about it. Enjoy your victory." He concluded by leaving. Musa yelled, "Hey, where are you going?" Before he turned a corner, he yelled, "Home. A transformation down to the DNA really wears you down. I need to crash." He teleported to the rune above his bed and landed in it, activating an undisguised Hirishin and saying, "Oh what the fuck, I'll risk it." As Zing fluttered down to an extra pillow he kept for her, he hurriedly took off his boots, coat, and jeans before putting on some pajama bottoms and taking off his t-shirt before slipping into his bed. Exhausted 3-2-1 ACO, he had left. Palladium said, "Now class, this is going to be a practice within the simulator for surviving dangerous areas and a good lord." Gazing into the simulator, he saw Zing and Naruto spinning around with lights blaring loudly and a clone of each of them playing the drums as they rocked out dueling guitar style. It's reboots dueling guitars, but with Zing in Bob's place and Naruto in megabytes, and an expanded Zing and Naruto rocking out. They stared at him as he said, "Excuse me, you two." Over the speaker the music screeched to a stop. Zing yelled, "Hey, you're killing the mood here." "Well, I apologize for that, however I do have a class to teach." "And why don't you do that at Cloud Tower anyways?" asked the man. Zing jerked a thumb at him, and he gave her a look. "Naruto here got us banned from the simulator there for a month with his last stunt." Naruto objected, saying, "Hey, I seem to recall a pint-sized cheerleader there egging me on." Zing questioned, "Who called up the hellfire?" With a slightly arrogant expression, Naruto remarked, "Hey, it's not my fault it wasn't built up to code." Zing yelled at him, "You blew up an entire wing of Cloud Tower." As the simulator deactivated, Naruto retorted, dispelling himself and demonstrating that the person on the drums was the real Naruto. It fixed itself, and Cross managed to regrow the skin they lost. With a sigh, Zing shrank to her normal size and flew over to land on his shoulder as he walked towards the exit. He then disappeared and reappeared as he passed Palladium. The class let out a little sigh of relief as he explained, "Hold on Naruto, it's a little early in the semester for it, but I believe my class would appreciate a bit of knowledge on pixies like your friend there. I can introduce them to a volcano and its effect on spells later." They had no desire to climb a huge, burning mountain. Palladium's audacity inside the simulator was unexpected. Figure it out. He shrugged, assuming it was a straightforward request, and nodded in agreement with Zing. "All right, sure, what do you need to know?" he said. "The process of bonding as it is called." Zing nodded and tapped Naruto, indicating that she would accept it. "For a normal fairy and a pixie you just need a single match. These matches can be in hobbies. The general theme of your powers are a few personality traits. With me and Naruto it's the fact that we love causing mischief all over the place that helped us bond," she said while patting his earlobe. "But there's more to it than that. Every now and again a match can be made that by all logic just wouldn't work. I think I remember meeting a fairy that was heavy into sports with an always napping newborn. For a bonded pixie they had nothing in common, but the bond was just as strong," Naruto said with a little thought on his chin. Naruto smiled when one of the fairies in the class asked, "How did you two bond?" Palladium nodded before Naruto disappeared in a burst of yellow light, leaving Zing to catch herself in midair. "It would be best if we showed you." Grandma has a habit of using magic to make family videos. At times annoying, at others useful. Give me a few minutes, I'll get it. She smiled and said, of course he realizes this means war. The class chuckled when Stella said, knowing him, he's counting on it. Naruto flashed back at the keyboard and inserted a disc, saying, well, that was easy enough. By the way, if I hear any teasing about this, I will get you back 50 times over. Hinata answered, you're on. Naruto turned to look at her with a chuckle before returning his attention to the screen as it burst into life. When she and Naruto arrived in a small village, they looked like giants in comparison to their surroundings. Griffin said, now Naruto, we're guests here, so I expect you to be on your best behavior. He pressed a couple of buttons, then inserted a tiny crystal needle into the CD slot before Palladium pushed him away. Oh crap. This is the first visit, gimme a moment. I'll take this out, and why isn't it coming out? Come on, he said. He gave a few bewildered blinks. He looked utterly shocked and said, be on my best what? Before disappearing in a blurry spiral of green lights, she said, precisely, now go and have fun. Behave but have fun? Let me guess, I should stay out of the sun but away from dark places while I'm at it? He raised his eyebrows. Some of the statements and questions that were thrown around were, oh, you were so cute as a kid. Why'd your hair change color, and what happened to those adorable whiskers? And, how old were you? After summoning Hellfire to destroy the terminal, Naruto angrily retorted, I was about 8 and the color changes were due to magic. That's all you're getting. So this is the Pixie village. Whatever's going on about those codex thingies that everyone says is important, and Grandma got a weird idea about needing a friend. I mean, Hinata's my friend, why'd I need more? I've got all Cloud Tower to play with, so what's wrong? He was thinking loudly. When the class behind him, awed at his younger self's previous remarks, Naruto moaned, son of a bitch. On the screen, Griffin was frowning at him. He straightened up after she chastised him, saying, Naruto, the next time you want a video from my collection, ask. He questioned incredulously, how in the blue bloody bowls of butt fucking hell does she do that? And her image frowned even more. And watch your language while at Alphia, you know how upset Faragonda gets, the picture stated. He said sadly, yes Grandma. Naruto sighed as she said sharply, don't take that tone with me. This is your punishment for the damages to Cloud Tower. I just can't win. The screen went blank as she said, not against me, now you will see the scenes you intended to show. With despair, Naruto questioned, how does she do that? Before the scene began, Griffin's voice said, I'm just that good. In utter frustration, Naruto slammed his head against the wall. The young Naruto nodded when Griffin asked, so Naruto, enjoying yourself? He looked impish as he said, it's hard making traps so small, but it should be useful back home. Griffin grinned. Now Naruto, there's a reason I've been bringing you here. Essentially your natural monotype will have an extremely difficult time emerging without help. It needs a purifying presence, and all pixies have natural healing magic of some form. By forging a bond between you and a pixie here, it will empower the both of you without any negative side effects. Is there any one of them that stood out? Not really, Naruto started, but as soon as he heard screams, his head spun around. They turned to see Ninfi, the pixie village leader and protector of their codex fragment, saying, it's Zing again, I'm sorry she keeps getting into trouble. She wore a yellow dress and cape with a pink lining, a jeweled staff, and shimmering blonde hair styled to a sweeping point with a gem set in the center. Ninfi blinked in response to Naruto's question, what kind of trouble? Well, mostly pranks and such mischief. She has an affinity for insects and uses it to be as annoying as possible, usually harmless but very abrupt and disturbing, she replied dismissively. With a sly and contemplative expression on his face, Naruto questioned, could they be more? At this stage, the whiskers only served to enhance his fox-like appearance. Some fairies exclaimed, cut, and Naruto moaned, wondering what in the world could have been slipped into his food to make him think this was a good idea at all. Ninfi said cautiously, yes I suppose. Naruto's sly expression changed to one that was downright evil. Zing then, he exclaimed, and Ninja's face lit up. Why her? You haven't even met her yet. Ninfi gave Naruto a critical glance before letting out a sigh. Because I've been all over this place and there isn't anyone here I want to really be with. It's not that they're mean or bad or anything, it's just that the things they like are things I don't like. Zing sounds different. Griffin grinned as she sighed and shook her head, saying, just like his mother, following her statement, alright then, but first you two must live at least a week together to make sure that the match works. She then directed some energy, and a younger, even smaller Zing emerged from a tiny flash of purple light. She protested right away, saying, I didn't do it, whatever they said was a total lie. Griffin said, familiar words, Naruto? And he laughed. Zing asked, looking somewhat perplexed at the fox-like boy and the obvious witch nearby. What's going on? Zing flew over to Naruto and started flying around him to get a good view as Ninfi explained. Well, young one, the boy you see in front of you is in need of a partner and you seem to be the best match. However, this is not a light decision. If a bond is formed, only death may remove it. Zing questioned, so partners? What's that gonna mean? Naruto shrugged. Zing double blinked before smiling as Griffin clarified, it means you two will amplify one another's power and be able to use the other's abilities to an extent. Zing questioned, so what can you do then? And Naruto summoned a ball of hellfire. She exclaimed, that's it? Lame. Naruto appeared enraged before extinguishing the fire and creating a cross seal, which caused another Naruto to emerge in a puff of smoke. Cool. I'm sold. If only you teach me that. Ninfi let out a frustrated sigh. Griffin's nod did nothing to bolster her confidence as she observed. A match made in hell, it would seem. The video finally came to an end. The class couldn't stand it any longer and burst into helpless laughter when Palladium asked, well then, now Naruto's spent the past 20 minutes trying in vain to use the now awarded console so as to stop the video, only being halted from resorting to violence by no less than 5 scrying censors. Does anyone have any remaining questions? Naruto growled at the hellfire raging around him, saying, that's it. Everyone dies. He released a powerful breath in the direction of the class, but Palladium blocked it with an energy barrier. If it were only fair, Naruto's red glow eyes found Palladium and he lunged at the elf, who leapt back and flew through the air, guiding him away from the class. While he was now paying great attention desperately, the teacher dodged, blocked, deflected, and teleported as a torrent of fireballs were hurled at her. He was narrowly avoiding hellfire blasts, and it appeared that his luck would soon run out. Palladium used the wall that had been blasted out of the hallway as an escape hole and flew outside, creating some space between them so he could erect a more powerful shield. Naruto yelled, Volpes Vulpus Flamma, as a massive spiral of dark fire shot upward, forming into a dark blue fox with red eyes that glowed as the enormous 9-tailed fox charged at the elf. He screamed, Grar, and spat out a crystal that had broken in midair, hooking onto each claw and turning the tips of its tail into jagged blades. When the barrier the teacher had built was launched in the direction of the fox, fire erupted from the sky, and Naruto disappeared. The hole in the wall started to mend itself after the fire went out. Palladium told the class, which by this point was looking shell-shocked, well class, I hope you have learned an important lesson today. Never tempt a magic user if you do not know their proficiency. Oftentimes it will influence the behavior of the magic user in question. From the wall above them, Naruto declared, you me big time for all of this. He was utterly composed and giving the teacher a stern look. He tossed Naruto a little book and said, this is the first part of your payment, in a single motion. He caught it with one hand and tucked it into one of his cargo pockets. With a shocked tone, someone said, wait, so all that was fake? Palladium explained, and everyone looked back and forth, completely taken aback. Pretty much no one was in any danger, although we were using razor-sharp force barriers and fires so hot that stone would melt in a moment. A student questioned, so even Naruto just being there and Lady Griffin one-upping him? Naruto coughed and then disappeared. The crowd turned to see where Naruto was, but he had already left. Palladium said, Naruto being there was indeed planned, but his grandmother was an unexpected surprise. It did however add to the lesson. Bloom put her hand on her heart and remarked, that was scary. I really thought he went off the rails for a minute. Everyone stared at Stella as she said, I went through it last year and it still scares me. What? Everyone nodded in agreement as Musa said, some warning would have been nice, before turning to look at Tecna, who had maintained her composure the entire time. What? There was only a 2.39 percentile chance that he had actually gone berserk. That and his pulse stayed steady during the entire time, meaning such activates had to be both non-exhaustive and unsurprising, meaning premeditated and light exercise. She clarified, and everyone in hearing range looked at her as she spoke. The entire damn class had heard it because it had been silent before she spoke. What? Someone said, you couldn't have told us anything. Tecna sighed as she glanced into the crowd. There was a sigh as she said dismissively, there was a 0 percentile chance of me being believed anyways. Tecna recoiled when someone said, annoying cyborgs, and then the same voice squealed in outrage. Naruto reappeared as if he had never left and said, watch it little lady, she's a friend and I'm vindictive. Do you really want to go any further? In his hand, he was flinging an egg up and down. But, when Naruto said, may Voss grow Vomika, may you grow boils, the girl screamed and fled the crowd. Sobbing and covering her face, the fairies took a step back, wondering what in the world he had done to her. Anyone else? He asked. Good. As he calmly left after the hysterical girl, Palladium said, class dismissed. I have to check on Miss Forcia. Stella asked, "What did you do?" And Naruto smiled back. She gave him a fierce look when he said, "Boils." The Winx moaned, "What?" She had it coming. And walked away from him. They gave him a disbelieving look when he added, "Hey, wait up. Look, I need to be away from Cloud Tower for the next few days, and I know a break's coming up with some of you leaving for a while. Can I come with?" He raised his hands and said, "I have an explanation?" He sighed as Stella said, "We're waiting. I forgot to check the date when I was experimenting with my Hellfire. Grandma's going to be really testy for the next few days. What she did during that lesson is just a slight breeze before the hurricane. I have maybe an hour left before she starts to come down on people for things like breathing too loud. This is a very bad time of year for her," he said with a serious tone. They were not buying it, but they were hesitating. Naruto grimaced as Flora remarked, "And why is this a bad time of year? I think the 10th of October would be worse." There were some flinches as he explained, "This is the anniversary of her marriage and honeymoon. My grandfather was killed on their second honeymoon also in this week. Trying to protect her." Everyone looked around before Bloom sighed. "Why else do you think my grandmother or really, witches and warlocks in general are so bitter and harsh? Our lives are filled with so much crap, we're ass deep in it at best," he said. "I'm going to be visiting my parents on another planet. I've just figured out portal magic, so if you really need to then I don't think they'll mind you staying in the guest room," she said, and he let out a breath of relief. With a warm smile, he said, "Thank you." Bloom nodded as he said, "How soon can we get out of here? I have maybe an hour before the guillotine drops." "I'm going in 20 minutes. Meet me in front of the dorm," she replied. He bowed slightly and said, "Thank you, I'll see you there." Then he vanished with a flash of yellow. Flora asked, "Come to think of it, what happened to Zing?" And everyone stared at her in disbelief. Remembering the Pixie only now, the revelation that Zing was sitting on Flora's head, no less, gave them yet another shock. She exclaimed, "What? You're only now noticing me? You girls really need to work on your awareness. See you later," before soaring off into the sky and disappearing from view. "Great, so we have to deal with a 6-foot prankster ninja and a 6-inch one too," Musa shrieked. Stella reminds her, "He's not that bad after all. He did defend Tekna earlier." Stella shook her head, but Tekna continued, "I still wonder why he actually helped me. It seemed more like cruel entertainment to me." Tekna, ahhed, as she dismissed it, saying, "No, I find that unless he's got a good reason to lie, he just won't. He's weird that way." "Okay, I'm ready," Naruto said, holding a drawstring bag and a single sling dangling from his back. "Please let me know the correct name for this. I've been frantically searching for one. It appeared to be overflowing with clothing." He snorted as Stella said, "That was fast." There were a few sighs, but they chose to ignore the subject. A guy getting ready for a couple of days away is simply tossing a bit from his underwear drawer in a bag and grabbing a jacket. "That's all we need," he said plainly. Bloom whispered, "You know I expected you to take a while." Bloom sighed as he said nonchalantly, "I actually wrote my excuse of absence note this morning. I just didn't fill in the names. Now I have." He nodded as she said, "I'll be ready soon, but please don't make me regret this." After 20 minutes Bloom asked, "Ready?" And he nodded. A bright orange and yellow fire encircled them both before compacting in on itself, and they both disappeared as she said, "Okay, then hold on to your horses." Earth Gardenia Vanessa called out, "Bloom, it's so good to see you again, sweetie," while giving her daughter a hug. Mike embraced her and said, "Welcome home, sweetheart." Naruto shook the big man's hand as he said, "And I see you brought a friend. We haven't been properly introduced yet, Michael Peters." He grinned and said, "Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze Entari, a pleasure." Naruto snorted as Mike pointed out, "Long name that. I've seen a lot longer. There's a world where you name everyone of either your fathers or mothers depending on gender, going back all the way to the founding of the planet, which is 50 or so generations long. It's nuts," he said with a grin. Bloom blushed slightly as he said, "Well, nice to meet you. You've been keeping her out of trouble, I hope?" "I've tried, but it's not easy. I left for a quick 2 weeks at one point and she had gotten into several hair-raising situations. I don't think that she understands that magic does not equal immortal, and even if it did, others have magic too, and she's still a beginner," Naruto stated bluntly. Mike laughed at her embarrassment as she half yelled, "Naruto," with her face burning. He went on, seemingly unaffected, causing Bloom to blush even more before Vanessa embraced her, saying, "But she's proven to be talented for a beginner to the point that all she lacks is experience. She's already unlocked a true fairy form, which is rare for someone her age. Her friends also have them because they're all powerful lifelong magic users, and she can match them." Mike started to say, "Well that's," but was cut off when his watch started beeping. He kissed his wife on the lips and then his daughter on the forehead and said, "Oh dear. Time to go to the station later, honey. It's good to see you again, sweetheart." He waved to Naruto, who waved back before entering the house. Vanessa led Bloom inside and said, "All right, let's leave the yard so you can tell me about your year so far." After shrugging and scratching his head as if he had forgotten, Naruto picked up his own and Bloom's bags and followed them. After a while, as they started to make dinner, Vanessa asked Bloom, "So how long are you off for?" "A pot roast that would be simmered slowly in a crock pot for the remainder of the day after being flash cooked in the oven. It smelled delicious already." "A week, it's some kind of holiday." Reaching for another raisin-oat cookie, Naruto remarked, "Week of Veristaligo, or roughly translated Week of True Love." Vanessa exclaimed, "Oh, a Valentine's week. How romantic." Naruto smiled. Bloom started off by saying, "Wait, it's a romantic holiday? Oh my god, he must think that oops." Naruto's smile widened as Vanessa started to pay close attention to her daughter right away, but not before she started to massage her daughter. "The roast!" Naruto yelled, leaping over the counter and reaching into the oven, which was now completely extinguished. He took out the dish and placed it on the counter while licking his arms. Bloom exclaimed, "Get back! I got this!" As she concentrated, a great number of orange sparks appeared above her head, and the smoke and fire were all absorbed into it before disappearing into thin air. Vanessa collapsed into a nearby chair and said, "Oh my." She looked up at her daughter with a smile and said, "You are amazing." Naruto said, Hey, we saved the roast." They looked over to see him standing above the oven, which instead of being broken and burned looked brand new. "How did you?" inquired Bloom. "A simple repair spell. It's one of those things everyone seems to know when they arrive, so it's not on any curriculum. I can show it to you if you like," he replied with a grin. "Well, you've certainly not wasted any time making some incredible friends either, have you, sweetie? Now why don't you show him around your old hometown? I'll have dinner ready soon enough," she said as she removed Naruto from the kitchen. Naruto allowed the slender woman to push him out the kitchen door and said, "Okay, but watch out for the pota, it's still scalding hot." Vanessa asked, "Then how were you holding it?" "While holding it on her hips." He smiled slightly and said simply, "I'm fireproof." After 20 minutes, as he pedaled Mike's bike next to Bloom, who was riding her own, Naruto observed, "This place is pretty nice. It has a real homey feel to it. Calm, yes, it's calm." She said. "Red light stop before the line," Bloom observed. "Yeah, it's a good place to grow up." They both applied the brakes. "Hey there, little one," Mike exclaimed as his fire truck pulled up. "Hi, Daddy," Bloom exclaimed, and Naruto grinned as he observed the exchange from the other side, giggling to himself about how uncomfortable it would have been to be on Bloom's right side instead of the left. The illumination shifted. As he drove away, he said, "See you at dinner." She led Naruto away after saying, "Yay, have a good day." She nodded when he said, "Hey Bloom, you mentioned something called pizza before, right?" She smiled and pointed to a street on the hill, and he nodded as they rode down. "I'd like to try one. I'll treat you when we get back to Magic's." Naruto just got off the bike and picked it up, while she hopped off the bike comfortably and began to walk. A voice from close by said, well, look who's back." Naruto, who was still slightly behind a corner, could only observe Bloom's response. Bloom said, "Oh Misty, I'm here on break." "On break from what?" Bloom was about to leave when Misty blocked her path. "From school, I have to go." Naruto arched an eyebrow at the sight of the girl wearing diva sunglasses. "Hey, what's the rush? Everyone in our class is asking why you left." "I switched schools, that's all." "You found Gardneria High School too challenging?" Misty inquired. Naruto intervened to spare Bloom from Misty, saying, "Actually, she was scouted by a prominent student of my godmother's school. She's got so much in raw talent that they just had to have her." Misty demanded in shock, "What? She got into a private school?" Naruto nodded. Naruto responded, "Yeah, she's got a free tuition as well anyways. Bloom's told me about this great pizza place nearby and I'm rather hungry, Sayo." Bloom then used that as an excuse to pass Misty, with Naruto pursuing. Bloom told him, "Thanks for the save back there." He grinned and said, "No problem, her aura told me everything I needed to know." "Her aura?" inquired Bloom with her at his side. He said, "Right, you're not used to it yet." As he slowed to a stop pointing to a muscular man walking a dog, Naruto remarked, "Look at that man there. Think of the soul as you gaze upon him." Then she smelled the roses he had passed by and saw what appeared to be a purple ghost fly out. Purple. The color of dishonesty. He's not being honest with himself, and to keep up a self-image he has cultivated, he refuses to allow his more sensitive side out. Naruto was staring at her. Bloom asks, grinning, "Why couldn't I see them at Magic's?" When he asked, "So where is the pizza place?" she smiled and shook her head, The magic itself, it's just as much the lock as the key. It hides your aura while letting you see someone else's, though you can make out color if you look hard enough. He nodded and followed her to her mother's flower shop a few doors down. Bloom said, "Just around the corner. I'll need to borrow some money from Mom though." Naruto moaned as they entered. "What?" inquired Bloom. Naruto yelled loud enough for everyone in the store to hear. "Your mother is speaking to the two most blatantly obvious, inept, and transparent conmen I've ever seen." "What?" Bloom inquired once more. This time in shock. She was surprised he was making this announcement, even though she had seen their auras. A shifty driver out front, a deal out of nowhere, a deal too good to be true. Speaking in sync, stiff posture with the shoulders forwards, slicked back hair. The second lower left molar of the taller one is golden for crying out loud. Roving eyes looking for escape routes. Striped suit on one of them. A total opposite double act with somehow matching yet very different suits to catch and draw attention away from what they're actually saying. A general angry motion in their movements and numerous other twitches and characteristics that just scream conman. Naruto explained with a single breath before panting slightly, "Oh, I'm sorry, am I interrupting something?" One of them demanded, "Just what gives you the right to call us conmen?" As they rushed over and attempted to threaten him, Naruto looked down his nose and said, "Training, I was simply putting together a profile." One of them said, "Do you know who we are?" They both stiffened when Naruto said, "Two idiots with petty thugs." They marched out after the short one declared, "Well, I can see there is no need to offer any deals here. You obviously don't know good luck if it danced in front of you." Bloom started, "Naruto, what did you?" He took a stack of papers out of his jacket and held them in front of him, saying, "Saved your mother's flower shop. Call the police, I've just pulled some incriminating documents off of them." He held them out and said, "These detail how these men tricked no less than 23 people out of their businesses before scrapping them into something more profitable." Vanessa hurried forward, took them, and gasped as she quickly scanned them. She sputtered angrily, I trusted them. As Vanessa started to yell, "Oh, if I could get my hands on those two crooks." There was a crash and tire skidding. Both of them turned to face Naruto, who merely grinned slyly. Bloom asked, "How did you do all that?" And he briefly laughed. Bloom began to giggle as he said nonchalantly, "I've had a few clones following me all day. They got the notes. They've analyzed the car. They helped me with the profiling. It's one of my better strengths. There is safety in numbers after all, and I'm an army." Vanessa said, "Useful, but what do we tell the police?" And he smiled. "The wind blew a paper into my face, and when I read it I decided to collect the rest before coming to visit the flower shop where the men introduced themselves as the people listed on the paper. A coincidence, but hardly a crime." Bloom put a finger to his lips and said, "You planned for this somehow, didn't you?" The following day Naruto said, "Morning princess, don't you look chipper?" As a frazzled-looking flower entered the dining room clutching a pillow and wearing a haunted expression. "Sweetie, what's wrong?" Vanessa inquired anxiously. Bloom muttered, "I saw something last night and I don't know what to make of it." Naruto sipped his coffee and said, "You mean you had a vision and do not understand the symbology?" She shook her head. He asked, "A vision of the past then?" And received a nod. She sounded lost as she said, "I saw myself as a baby, in a fire, and Daddy rescued me." After exchanging anxious glances for a short while, Mike and Vanessa let out a sigh. "Yes, Mike, I think it's time we told her." Naruto pushed out of the chair and stood against a wall to give her the seat when Bloom asked, "Told me what?" Mike acknowledged, and Bloom gasped, "That vision, of me rescuing you from the fire, it was true. 16 years ago I witnessed a miracle. A newborn baby resting calmly in the middle of an inferno, untouched and unhurt by the fire it kept away from you, like it respected you." Vanessa went on, "We knew that day that you were a very special girl." With tears welling up in her eyes, Bloom said, "Then that means you aren't my parents." As he raised his drink in a sort of toast and took a deep pull, Naruto broke Bloom's tears by saying, "Of course they're your parents. They raised you, they cared for you, they watched you grow up. Someone else may have given you life, magic, and made you a fairy, but it's Vanessa and Michael Peters that made you Bloom in the end. Nothing more is truly needed. Sure, there are questions, but there are always questions." He saw the looks. He ducked out of the room to let Bloom just spend time with her parents, saying, "Look, Bloom told me to behave, so that means no tricks. No pranks, meaning I get like this."
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.